Welcome to the Managing the Smart Mind podcast with your host, Coach Kramer. This is episode 12, Black and White Thinking, part 1. What is it? Hello, and welcome to this week's first episode. As you may have noticed, I like to keep the podcast packed with information and relatively short. My own neurodivergent brain has a very short attention span and little patience for fluff. Also, many of the concepts I introduce here are much easier to grasp after hearing about them repeatedly. And making the episodes long and fluffy would definitely interfere with that. Your brain would simply get too bored to listen. Which means that this week, because I have so much to teach you about black and white thinking, I have broken the podcast up into episodes. In the first part, I will talk about what black and white thinking is and how it can show up in your life. In the second one, I'll give you 3 tools to help you get rid of those black and white thoughts that aren't serving you. So, first, what is it? This black and white thinking, also known as binary thinking, all or nothing thinking, polarized or dichotomous thinking. It is very basically thinking in extremes, in polar opposites, in either or. I'll give you some examples of binary thoughts. He is perfect. This is never going to work. She's always late. I am never going to learn this. When you're thinking this way, you won't be able to see the messy grey zones in between, the place where we actually live, despite what social media and advertising try to make us believe. Life, unlike logic, is never black and white. And please know that all of us do this. I have been working on my mind for years. I am a master certified coach and I still unintentionally do it. I'm human. In fact, I got coached yesterday on my thoughts about LinkedIn. And one of my thoughts was, it's impossible to keep up with all the comments and all the posts. And I really deeply believed that thought until my coach pointed out that this was just black and white thinking, which made me laugh so hard because I had been working on this podcast all day and I still didn't see it. This, by the way, is why I love getting coached. I really still need an extra pair of eyes on my brain. So, black and white thinking, we all do it. And there's a reason our brain wants to do it. We are constantly bombarded by input from our senses as well as our own thoughts. And our brain needs to process all that stuff without melting down. The world is not only messy, it's also pretty overwhelming. Which is why our brain, our smart mind, has learned to break down the world in simple categories. As we grow up, it learns to neatly file events, things, people into categories. Friend or foe, success or failure, edible or poisonous. This helps us to make decisions in the moment without having to deliberate forever. Instead of thinking, oversized feline creatures approaching with spots and large teeth, what should I do? We think, tigers, run! Or at least that is what I like to imagine. Probably I would just faint on the spot. But our brain needs to quickly sort our sensory input so we can make decisions, manage our experiences, and maintain at least a semblance of order. Black and white thinking in its basic form is essential for this sorting process, and thus for our brain to function properly. Okay, great. But there's always a but, isn't there? When we start taking black and white thinking too far, our lives actually get very difficult. Extreme black and white thinking causes cognitive distortion, which can result in things like anxiety and depression. And cognitive distortion or bias happens when the thoughts you repeatedly think distort your experience of reality. When you indulge in too much black and white thinking, you start to see the world in black and white. Either people are angels or they're evil and out to get you. Either you succeed at life or you fail miserably. Either you are a perfect partner or a lousy one. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's a bit extreme. I don't think like that at all. But I want you to consider these sentences, some of which you have probably uttered at some stage in your life. There is no way to solve this problem. Social media is evil. Rich people are bad. I'm never going to figure this out. I can't stick with anything. This is a disaster. There's nothing I can do. These are actually all examples of black and white thinking. And if you repeat them often enough, they will get you from a growth mindset into a fixed mindset. It will make you very hard, if you think this way, to find solutions to problems or to make any significant changes in your life. Black and white thinking quickly kills all creativity. And when thinking in these extremes, your brain filters out anything that doesn't fit the storyline, creating that cognitive distortion or bias that I just mentioned. So when a good thing happens in your life, you just dismiss it. When something works for you or you do something amazing, you decide, oh, it's just a fluke. And when someone treats you with kindness, you may even become suspicious because it doesn't fit in with your black and white thinking. So your reality becomes distorted by polarized thoughts that leave no room for nuance. And it should come as no surprise that if this happens in your head for a prolonged period of time, you're likely to become anxious, depressed, or both. Been there, done that. Basically, when this happens, your brain is filtering out all the good stuff that lives in the middle, so you think it's no longer there. But even if it's not that bad, it can still be a real confidence killer. If your brain has decided that you suck at something, it actually ends up undermining your confidence and turns it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. You create a negative reinforcement spiral. Let's say you want to learn a fun new thing, like fencing or origami, but you have an underlying belief that you suck and this is never going to work. Then you try it kind of half-assed because you think you suck anyway. Then your brain notices all the ways in which you're not doing it perfectly, of which there are plenty because, hey, it's something that you haven't done before. You then judge yourself for your perceived failure. You feel even less confident. And the next time you try it, if you try it again at all, you find even more ways in which you suck. Your confidence decreases further, etc., etc. Right? This is like the negative reinforcement spiral that a lot of people get stuck in. And eventually you will think you have all the evidence that you will never, ever be able to do this thing, right? So black and white thinking can put you in a fixed mindset. It can kill your confidence, but there's more. Because black and white thinking tends to make us believe that change is impossible, it paralyzes us. And I will give you some examples of how this can show up. You may have been thinking about changing your job or even career, but your brain believes that work is always going to be boring and exhausting, no matter where I go. So why bother? Or you may want to lose some weight, but you tell yourself that it's going to be impossible to keep it off. So what's the point of even starting? Or you want to make a shit ton of money, but your brain believes that rich people are evil. So you steer yourself away towards other goals. Now, I'll talk more about what you can do to counteract this in the next episode. But first, let's look at one more area where all or nothing thinking can really mess with you, and that's your identity. When you believe your identity is either or, you set yourself up for a lot of anguish and stress. When you believe that either you're smart or stupid, or either successful or a failure, or either a good person or bad, life becomes very intense. Because, listen, the world is going to make you think you're stupid sometimes. however smart you may be, you're going to fail at things. Unless you really don't try a single thing, in which case you're probably already miserable. And you're going to do things in your life which, in hindsight, you're not very proud of. You're human. You're on a messy planet with a messy brain living a messy life. You are not defined by the labels you or other people want to attach to your being. You are just you. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, sometimes you're disciplined, sometimes you're lazy. This, by the way, was a big one for me. I thought I was so lazy, and then I started actually looking at my life, and it turned out that in some ways I was incredibly disciplined, and in other ways I was very lazy. Both opposites can coexist. And maybe sometimes you're considerate. Sometimes, like me, you're a bit of a dick. You can show up in a myriad of ways and not make it mean anything about your value or character. So stop thinking about yourself in absolutes. If that's actually all you take away from this episode, you will make me very happy, because that in itself can be life-changing. But now let's move from you to the world outside you. Again, black and white thinking can keep us stuck here in a place we really don't want to be. Hating our colleagues, not making enough money, being angry about injustice without taking any action. It makes us believe we're helpless, powerless victims of circumstance. It tells us to just shut up and suck up because things are never going to change. And sadly, many of us do. We complain a little. We may even still dream about the other extreme. For example, living this blissful life in some tropical destination whilst money magically appears into our bank account. But because this is just a perfectionist fantasy, we revert back to what we always do. And we're miserable about it. This way of thinking keeps us stuck in perfectionist paralysis. This is basically your unmanaged mind wanting you to avoid taking risk and presenting only two options, both of which aren't good. But at least the one you're familiar with feels kind of safe, so that's the one you stick with. I want you to not buy into this. There's always at least a third, and usually many, many more options. Okay, so we now know that black and white thinking hurts your confidence, your capacity for change, makes you see the world through a very negative lens, and can totally paralyze you. So how do you change this? Well, as I say a lot on this podcast, everything starts with awareness. I want you to start paying attention to thoughts you repeat throughout the day, and specifically to watch for sweeping statements. Are you using absolutes like always, never, impossible, complete, total? Are you stuck in some dramarama? Then you're probably indulging in black and white thinking. And if you find this difficult, if you're like, I can't notice my thoughts, I'm just so wrapped up in what I'm doing, then you can also use another tool which is incredibly powerful in itself. You can do what is called a thought download. Just grab a piece of paper and you write down what you believe about yourself, the world, other people, the way things should be. And then you look at what you've written down and you check for blanket statements, absolutes, and perfectionist fantasies. And there's probably going to be a couple. So once you've uncovered them, you want to start changing them. And that's what we're going to do in the next episode. But before I go, a little bit more about my work, because I get a lot of questions about what I do as a coach and what does it look like to work with me? How do I help people, etc., etc. Well, this episode is actually a great example of some of the most important work I do. I help people uncover and then change thought patterns that sabotage them. So rather than addressing the symptoms of their problems, which can range from being discontented with life to burnout, overeating, overdrinking, etc., I actually help them address and solve the root cause, which is inside their mind. It's insanely effective, although not always easy. And it can also actually be a lot of fun. Once you learn to manage your mind, it's just so good. So if this is something you're interested in, let's talk. You can reach out to me via my website, coachkramer.org, or send me a message on LinkedIn for a free first consult. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I love that you found this podcast. And I also know that there are millions of smart minds out there that need better management. So I would love it if you could share this podcast with any other smart minds you know, so that they can find it too. And if there's a specific topic you'd love to see covered or someone you'd love to see interviewed, please let me know on podcast@elsakramer.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. If you like this episode, I'd love for you to leave a review so more people can find the podcast and learn to manage their smart mind. I'll see you